They want to own the biometric feedback data.
Right.
So they can actually see the cause and effect of the things that happen to you. So when I show you this, I want to see if you spike in this way. If I show you this, I want to see if you stay engaged with this content or if it appears that you drift off somewhere else. Because it's not just wearables. It's wearables. It's your video cameras. It's your microphone. It's your actual system logs coming from your computer and your phone and all these other elements. And I'm saying this as someone who helped build some of these ad tech systems. And I'm also saying this as someone who built a biometric feedback company that takes information from Garmin's that has things like stress and heart rate and HRV and all these other elements and can incorporate those pieces to try to help you improve your health. The difference is that with the things that I built, the user controls their data. With these other systems, that's not the case. The EULAs actually say they can take this data and use it how they want. And there's a big fight going on right now. It's been happening for a long time with companies like Aura and Garmin and Google, their Fitbits and Apple Watch around the notion that the data that they collect isn't actually medical data. Because if they call it medical data, then it has to fall into the HIPAA categorization. And if it falls into the HIPAA categorization, then in the US, they have to be more restrictive with it. And you have the right to go in and say, delete all this data. And the way that these companies work is that they take a lot of this data and they shift it and move it in different directions and they, quote, anonymize it. And when it gets anonymized, then they can't actually carry a thread through to figure out what is your data or somebody else's. So they can't decouple it, which means they can't decouple it from the macro learning functions that are there. So while it's your data, it's data about you, it's not your data according to them in the current model. It becomes much more difficult in a much grayer area when you start talking about HIPAA.
So, I mean, is again, it seems like the lesson here is if you don't want to participate, don't participate, right? Like if you don't use any of these, like that seems to be the only way to protect yourself from having all of this information taken.
Yeah. The problem is that the way society is set up and for people to be able to thrive and interact with society at the same level requires you to have access and use these tools. So you got to decide, like, are you going to be a member of this brave new world or are you just going to disconnect and go Ted Kaczynski? And like, I hate to break it down that way to like that level of binary choice, but that's what it is. Like, yeah, like there's not a middle ground anymore.
Until there is regulation and protection agencies globally, like you see in the EU, and I don't even know enough about them to know how strong it is. But I mean, if it's strong enough to slow some of these things down, it seems like we need more of that elsewhere in the world.
Well, it's strong enough to slow them down that companies are not deploying things in that direction, but it's not slowing them down from deploying learning and understanding from people that aren't in the EU.
Right. Exactly.
So they're not going to slow down. They're just not going to include the people in the EU in their data samples. Or I should say they'll limit it somehow, or they'll try to get around it, or they'll work their way through it. I mean, there have been several large fines against Facebook, against X, against a bunch of different places from the EU for these privacy data concerns. And they're not going to go, they're not going to stop. They just know that's the cost of doing business. And the fines are substantial, but the likelihood that, this actually slows things down is pretty low.
Speaking of the enshittification of all things technology, Nobel laureate Paul Krugman says that public animosity toward generative tech has boiled over into universal exhaustion fueled by corporate gaslighting, environmental hostility, and the aggressive degradation of everyday web services.